hope that's okay, and we will be putting that up on YouTube or whatever after. Um, Very short presentation. Welcome to the Game Builder call. As I just mentioned, this call is being recorded. If you're not, around and you're watching the recording, please join the Cartesi Developer Community Discord. The calls usually take place there. And we'd love to have you around. We'd love to jam on these topics and have some interesting conversations, such as the one we'll have today with Yijia. Very quick intro, one slider on Cartesi for anyone new here. We're basically building infrastructure for app-specific rollups with a expressive general-purpose execution environment. So we're quite tailored, let's say, for on-chain games. It's a general-purpose environment, but given that you have an app-specific rollup, you're not competing with other people for block space, which can be quite interesting for on-chain games. And we have this expressive general-purpose VM, this RISC-V based virtual machine, which lets you essentially run unmodified Ubuntu and essentially run Linux programs verifiably. And that's pretty interesting as well for expressive games that want to use like physics engines and want to go a bit crazy. That's the rundown on Cartesi. Today's agenda is rather short and to the point. We have Yijia, who's our guest speaker here today, join us, and then we can dive into some conversations and discussions. Usually, this conversation with the guest speaker tends to overflow a bit. Probably we can dive into any questions you guys have and make this a cool session. Maybe Yijia, you could start off with a short intro on yourself and kind of your path into this amazing on-chain game space.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Max, for inviting me here. I'm Yijia. I'm co-founder and CEO of Curio. Before crypto, I was a big strategy gamer, particularly in RTS strategy games like There Are Billions and like Civilization series. Thousands of hours spent there, and also just really love technology in general. And I think me and my co-founder first got into crypto around early 2021. First looking into just Solidity ecosystem, and then got into cool things like ZK. I think we were the first people in the crypto community writing CIRCOM for like on the application level. Or before it was cool. I wouldn't say the first people. And then got into on-chain game space mainly through the Dark Forest community and interacting with them and building ZK applications with Brian and others. My co-founder Kevin built a ZK social messaging protocol with Brian and other Zero to Power folks. That was really interesting. And in general, I think both the fully on-chain games as well as some of the more general games that started to become really popular as applications of blockchain, those really excited me on different fronts, right? So games like Axie and other games that innovated mostly on the economic side kind of showed us how games can create richer context for these crypto economic playgrounds and innovations to take place, even though they may at the current moment be still rather unsustainable. And on the other hand, the Dark Forest and on-chain games, these are just very cool usage of crypto native mechanisms where you're creating fun in a rather different way compared to traditional games. And we saw in the Dark Forest round V6 how enthusiastic the community. Oh, hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How everyone was passionate about building plugins and really using the ZK circuits and playing the game and all that, we saw basically very high degree of community engagement compared to even the high mod games like Skyrim. Right, it's just like a very clear sign of something's happening. But at the same time, there were very clear issues in the on-chain game space as well, such as the like back then the biggest issue I would say was basically building an on-chain game. There were no tools. Dark Forest took a year and a half to build, and it's just very difficult, and it still is, right, to create games out of smart contracts and Solidity completely. And so that was the first proposition that we wanted to solve, right? We wanted to essentially, along with some other things like improving UX, but really making on-chain games much easier to build, and therefore we can hopefully find something that actually resonates with the on-chain game community, and hopefully one day the broader mainstream community, right? And so that's how Curio started, and yeah, after, we started in January 2022, and since then have tried. I would say we've had a lot of change in micro changes in thesis. We're still building on-chain games, and that hasn't changed. That's been our North Star. But in terms of how to do that, there has been a lot of learning through trial and error, through observations, and happy to talk about any of that today. And also, yeah, I think we've made a ton of progress. We have, for everyone here, I haven't been on podcasts for a while, but we are just been heads down building. But we're launching some, we'll have big product launches within a few months, to say the most. So it should be really exciting time to engage with our products very, very soon. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, outside of that, happy to discuss anything.
Awesome. Yeah, no, super cool. I think we can get to the products in maybe a second, although probably you don't want to reveal too much yet. But I'm curious, where that stands. Like, is it a game, or is it a, more infra, or where that sits? But maybe first you can give a bit of, I'm really curious about these micro changes in the thesis that you discussed. I was going to ask you, like, what is this mission or vision of Curio?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious kind of how that trajectory looks like what has changed over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So when we started out, I think composability was the thing that attracted us the most. Essentially, to define composability in our meaning, it's basically allowing players to do things that contribute to the ecosystem in a meaningful way, that enhances the experience of others, right? So allowing people to do constructive things. The example people give most is Minecraft, right? And that's what also first got into our minds first. We thought, okay, the physical sense of composability, where people build kind of blocks, whether it's physical or metaphorical, that literally construct the world, right? Allowing a lot of flexibility there and building plugins there, so people have the max degree of flexibility. And therefore we built, in April 2022, we built a demo that it was a 2D Terraria essentially, where each building block, like each block in the world, in the virtual world, was a smart contract. So you could have a door that opens and closes only to people you whitelist, or you can have a teleportation machine that teleports you from point A to point B, right, to a different section of the map, things like that. Or you can even have your gold generator that generates like 15 million per gold per second. All of those are, it's only bounded by players' imagination. And that sounded cool, but we very quickly realized that it's very difficult to turn that into a game, because it quickly destroys game balance, right? There's very little guarantee of fairness in that scenario. And so we then started thinking, okay, how can we introduce composability in a way that actually does not that does not make people's lives harder. That does not make the game more inaccessible, right? And the answer we reached after 1 to 2 months of exploring was that we can focus on social composability instead. So instead of letting people literally craft the bricks and atoms of the world, we could have those built, which are fairly straightforward, and have people spend their creativity on devising the different social relations that they can have with other people. The contracts, like the corporate contracts, or basically the interpersonal contracts that we have in this real world, which are very very interesting and complex, and makes the real world very fun, but does not destroy the so-called game balance because the rule of physics stays the same. And I believe, Guilty Gills is on the call. You discussed similar concepts in perhaps a slightly different angle, and I think a lot of us identified that essentially social composability for treaties made a lot of sense when you think about like where you can have players create and build. So we made a game out of this called Treaty, capital T, and it was a 4X strategy game on a battle royale model. So lasts for 1 to 2 weeks. Players start on the edges of the map and gradually work towards the center. And it's a typical 4X game like Civilization, where you have troops, you have resources, and people basically manage the resources to build more troops, so to conquer more tiles and combat others. It's a very simple model, right? And we officially, as Max pointed out, had a in-person playtest in San Francisco in November 2022 and launched the game in January 2023 for 2 weeks. That was a kind of a test launch, and it went good. So there were good and bad things that happened from that game launch. The good things were there were a lot of people, not in the order of hundreds, but in the order of dozens, who really, really enjoyed the game, right? Who pointed out that they haven't played such a fun RTS-like 4X strategy game in many years, and not let alone in the on-chain game space, right? And we still, those people form our core community today, really. And that was a big signal or a boost, confidence boost for us. They grinded to get the max tile count and really spent a lot of effort in making sure they win the game, and competing for that final victory. And there's a lot of and then the second biggest a second good thing was that people actually used the treaties, the smart contract hooks that we added for people to draft those social relations. And the best example is there's someone who used a lending agreement to borrow troops at in the last 6 hours of the game, so to be able to defeat a very strong alliance, which is another smart contract that players created, and that player won, right? So it's literally UGC playing dynamics playing in this scenario, which is super cool. But the downsides are also very clear, and it's twofold as well. The first one is people did use treaties, but not to the extent that we can extend more so than we expected for that version, but in a way that it's very difficult to extend into a bigger game, right? And I'm sure a lot of people building in on-chain game space have gone through similar issues where you build a cool game, people kind of use the composability features, but they're not really doing that for this. They're doing that for the sake of it usually. If you don't use any alliance, if you don't sign any defense pacts with others, and you just grind, you can still win the game, right? And that's a bad thing, because that's a very then we don't need the fully on-chain game paradigm anymore. And the second problem was that the game was way too slow, and Treaty was the moment we discovered it. Actually, before that, we also built a just pure on-chain game without treaties in July, but I'll skip that for now. And so yeah, to recap, two problems. One is composability is not at the core, at least in the core in the game loop we designed. The second problem was performance. And to give an idea of how bad this issue was, the movements, right? In the game, we have troops be able to move uh, like basically one tile at a time based on solidity constraints because you don't have like active ticks and such. And but then based on our game complexity, right? Each contract call consumed hundreds of millions of gas, and we used Caldera at the time, which is a rollup provider. They gave us very powerful ETH node on like one of the most powerful AWS machines. It still ran. It still took 20 seconds in like a 25 concurrent game, a gamer scenario for each like tile movement to finish, right? So if you want to move from point A to point B, in a traditional game, it happens in 3 seconds and very smoothly. In our game, it takes like 63 seconds because the 60 seconds are from lags. And that's, we also implemented the contracts in a pretty optimal way. And it's basically inherent constraint of solidity and yeah, of solidity and developing games purely in smart contracts. So based on those two takeaways, I would say we formed our most up-to-date thesis, and till this day, we're more and more confident about it. I'll first talk about the throughput and performance. That's essentially the catalyst for building Keystones, right? So for anyone who's curious, Keystone is our in-house engine built for the Solidity ecosystem for building on-chain games. And up to date, it's the fastest on-chain game engine that in the like immediate ETH ecosystem, essentially, that does not sacrifice composability. And I'll talk about tech details in a moment if anyone's interested. And the second, the lack of composability in core loop, right? We essentially what we did afterwards in our current game, which started development in May or June last year, was that we put the composability now on the meta game level, and we made the game session based, right? So in each game, the core part is the PvP. It's not really about like players devising a contract within 10 minutes, which wouldn't be that useful, right? And essentially we leave the contracts and the innovation and the creativity on the metagame level, where we have a lot of tools built to maximally engage the players, the speculators of players, and many other roles in the ecosystem, right? We basically want to map the different types of people in the crypto ecosystem to different roles in the Curio ecosystem, right? And having the tools very much right curve tools to deliver like left curve experience to each and every one of these groups. And certainly composability is a very important part on the metagame level. I can't talk about too many details on this yet, but it's very similar to the thinking behind Uniswap V4, the hooks, and really to treaties, except on a more higher level, on an economic level. Yeah, so those are like our two biggest theses right now, which have evolved from our actual product launches and the failures and the successes from those launches. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to dive deeper into the tech of Keystone in a bit, but maybe just to kind of reiterate on this metagame level. So, do I understand it correctly that you would have like one game that sort of you were saying, like for example, small brains would play, like anyone could play it essentially, and you don't need to do any alliance stuff. But then, and those are sort of session based and PvP. But then other people who are interested in crafting these games, so a different persona of people would maybe add new rules and treaties and alliances kind of separately, or how do you understand that?
Yeah, I think that's generally correct. And just one thing about the game, it's not like I wouldn't describe it as like anyone or like a small brain type of game. It's like a very it has more nuance, right? So it's very easy to get started, but it has very deep. It has a lot of depth. It's kind of like poker in that sense, where it's easy to get started, but you can play for tens of thousands of games without really feeling bored. And yeah, and then the metagame what you describe is pretty accurate, where uh, like there's a lot of different types of crypto economic experiments people can do with smart contracts on the metagame level. Um, yeah,
Okay, interesting. Very interesting.
and we've learned a lot from the product launches by other people as well. I think the space has, yeah, I think has seen a lot of new innovations since Dark Forest, right? And that I can't name one by one, but um, yeah, it's like
Makes
it's a complex system on the metagame level.
But so how would you summarize like the new thesis, that like the new Curio thesis? Would it be like, because I know in the past you, for example, had mentioned
Yeah.
something like enabling player creativity. Is that still the core thesis, or is that like, has that changed a little bit, you think?
Um, I think so. I think we basically want to define creativity more concretely. Like, if I were to summarize the journey, which I probably just babbled too much just now, it's that we went from very idealistic views of launching game space or whatever games that we're building to concretely like where does everyone's like each group's contribution fit in, right? For some people, for some gamers, they they just want to really enjoy and rock the game, right? And that's what we allow them to do, and that's we focus on like our creative director and our lead client developer are both from MiHoYo, which is the company that developed Genshin Impact and Star Rail, right? Which are just like one of the best gaming companies in the world, and we've that's just an example of how much we've invested in the game experience, which are which are probably more important to that group of people compared to creativity, right? And now for let's say traders, they may want a specific type of creativity that allow them to earn based on their insights and observations about the players, the ecosystem, how things work, etc. Right? And we allow them to experiment there with their insights in that way. So I think it's just we've become more concrete on things, and if anything, I think we focus a lot on the economic side of innovations. If not from the beginning, then definitely I think from the beginning, but increasingly so.
Very interesting. Yeah, I don't think there's that many teams that lean into the crypto economic side, or from the teams we've had on, a lot of them kind of try to not talk about necessarily crypto economics as much. It's a bit more abstract
Yeah,
sometimes. Um,
yeah.
Stray away from like tokens and finance a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's really interesting. Like, what would be like so how having crypto economics kind of in the center here, like what does that mean for the rest of the game? Like, does it mean it's very, like, I don't know, financialized, like it's more, does it mean it's high stakes, for example?
Oh
um
yes, both. It's hyper financialized and it's high stakes, and speculators have a role, can have a very important role as well, which are all three things you probably never hear in the on-chain game space, but it is what our our like big realizations and faith are. Yeah,
Nice.
like basically like a simple case for financialization, right? For when it comes to on-chain games, which really is like about composability, is the following, right? Like if you allow people to, like, okay, let's take the example of treaties or social contracts, right? Um, people, like, why does it not need to happen? Like, why do gamers not need that in traditional games? Like in when you're playing like Rise of Kingdoms or Eve Online or like uh, I don't know, World of Warcraft. Why do you not need to sign smart contracts with other people about like, hey, like if you get into my territory, you have to pay me free gold. Like, why does that not need to happen on the contract level? Fundamentally, people don't really care about that, like when other people violate them, because they don't really lose very important assets, or maybe like in Eve Online's case, you don't lose as much, right, compared to the real world, or compared to DeFi or NFT world, where you actually have a lot at stake, right? So in traditional games, basically, you don't have a lot at stake, and therefore, it's like, if you meet someone insane, so be it, right? In most cases, it's much easier to just have a verbal agreement, and that is different only when the system you engage with is hyper financialized, which means people have a reason to really care, right? And it becomes like it's fundamentally different than from traditional games where it's really about dopamine. Now um, it's about endorphins, right? It's about kind of winning and losing, and the thrill of winning after streaks of losing. That's something that traditional gamers cannot tolerate, and we've seen trending, like, TikTok is also in this direction. The world seems being taken over by dopamine related projects, but it's also like it's not that way, right? Under the undercurrent is that, like, crypto. If we think of crypto itself as a game, or maybe the stock market as a game, right? These are endorphin based games, and you can also argue things like Elden Ring. They're occasional examples where players do have to suffer a lot in order to gain the final light. Uh, we basically want to design this type of game, and yeah, hope that offers some explanation.
No, 100%. Makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you've heard of like Nor. I don't think they're doing on-chain stuff, but they're kind of leaning into this kind of esport, and like if you lose kind of thing, right? Where you have like real money at stake, but also like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's indeed way more. It does target the whole degen DeFi audience that for now is the only sort of audience that has kind of found PMF, I guess, in crypto pretty well, right? Uh, so I
Yeah,
like I
and,
like
and I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like people in non-chain game space talk like avoid financialization due to personal, like, negative externalities.
mm,
But really, like, people just look for a good product, and a financialized product does not mean a product that, like, I think people. Okay, it's just like over indexing on Axie, basically, um, to put it simply, right? Like, people think like a
mhm.
game that's super financialized will just is a Ponzi that will break in a short period of time. Like, that does not have to be the case if you design the system robustly, right? It's kind of like the only way forward, and it's the only way, certainly, as I said before, to really have composability as a strong use case and solution. So so yeah.
Very interesting. So if you had to boil it down, what is this robustness, or what is it composed of? In order to avoid like another Axie or something like that, like what would be?
Well, the game has to be fun, and everyone talks about that, I know. But Axie isn't very fun to our standards, and so are most other games in the space. Now, the definition of fun is I would say maybe 70 or 60 to 70% similar to how you would define traditional games. Like, the game still has to be very smooth. You can't just have to. You can't wait for a transaction to go through. For like 2 to 3 seconds whenever you're taking an action, and the game can't hopefully it doesn't look pixely just like every other game, and it's not just another RPG where you go around and interact with DeFi protocols, right? Like, you can't just like follow the same playbook as everyone else. Now, does it have to be as aesthetically complete as and lore-wise complete as games like Baldur's Gate or Zelda? No, it doesn't have to be. And in fact, if you do that, it's probably the wrong type of investment, because some people will not play your game just because it's crypto, right? So you got to know who you're attracting. And as you said, like, degens are a very important group of people that you cannot ignore in the space, right? Like, and they're looking for crypto native and really uh, like different types of experiences that they cannot get from traditional games. Um, and it helps if they can make money from it, preferably from their own insights. For example, them learning or knowing something that other people don't. Right. So if you design that into the game, plus you have really good experience, really unique graphics, aesthetics, really strong lore, right, and a community that vibes, like that's the way to go. Hopefully, that's the formula we're going with, and we'll certainly see results. Uh, yeah, within a few months.
Awesome, awesome. Um, Maybe we can go a bit into the infra side as well, because you're building these games, but you're also building Keystone, right, which you mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, would you say that Keystone is like, tailored towards, this highly financialized type of game, or is it a more general framework? How would you describe
Um,
it?
yeah, so Keystone is not, in simple words, because the financialization really happens on a per game basis and per ecosystem basis. Like you have to. Oh, okay, yes and no actually. So I've already answered the no part. The yes part is like yes, like tokens are first class citizens in Keystone architecture. Um, so that's just like a important detail. But if I were to introduce Keystone, I think the biggest sell points are still that it's the most performant engine in on-chain games. Like if you're to build an on-chain game today with the like, and you hope to ship on Ethereum or one of the L2s, um, and you want players to not get stuck while playing the game and have super fast like experience, then Keystone is the way to go, right? Without sacrificing any composability. So essentially, what we did is we stopped. We instead of using smart contracts for both the social contracts as well as the game contracts, right? We only use EVM for the social contracts, which are the part that needs to be composable, and we use a structure more similar to a traditional game engine for the part that needs to be parallelized, that needs a lot of performance, such as moving a character from point A to point B, updating weather, things like that, right? So a couple of strong points that other that engines like Mud don't have are a tick system that literally uh, can yeah, as I said, update states, actively update state without lazy updates. You can have very fast parallelized game execution. For example, you can have 500, 1,000 animals moving 5 times a second on a map, right, without feeling any lag. And you can have, I'm sure you can have even bigger number. Like those two features are basically it's impossible with pure EVM designs. And based on my very limited knowledge of Cartesi, I think you guys have some similar really cool ideas on like extending beyond the EVM. So yeah, I think essentially it's taking the hybrid approach, and we're using using like very interesting uh, approaches to integrate with Celestia DA so that uh, people can basically players can verify that the game progressed in a fair way, just like how they verify in L2, right? Optimism Arbitrum, um, and in the future we can use any DA that our player, our community, or other developers community wish them to use, right? So yeah, in conclusion, I think yeah, Keystone is like basically a very fast game engine that gives devs what they really want and uh, allow them to build like a not slow, not shitty game that's fully on chain.
Very nice, very nice. Um, so you mentioned, I think, the ability to basically verify, right? I guess you rerun stuff kind of um, after the fact to verify, I suppose. Or
Yeah.
yeah, okay, okay.
Yes.
So that's nice. Yeah, I
And
think
yeah, and there's a similar fraud proof type of mechanism where if it's actually fraud, then you know the like the state like the sequencer gets punished.
mhm.
So yeah, that part's very similar.
Okay, very nice, very nice. You did I saw the Warcraft demo, right? You guys did something crazy there as well.
Yeah, that was just a demo of what I said, like hundreds of movements within a second, or more, like probably thousands as well. Um, yeah, but that was really like a visual demo. It's one thing to talk about these improvements, and another to show people something that just like moves and moves around in front of them, right? To grasp the concept. And knowing that we were still at least half a year away from launch, that was a good way for us to demonstrate the concept. And since then, people have reached out to us, like, how do we use Keystone, things like that.
Sick, sick. Okay. And you guys have this Go execution environment, right? Kind of.
hmm And we have basically interoperability between the game engine and the EVM through precompiles.
I see.
hmm
Very cool. And what was is there like a reason why you chose Go specifically? Is that like something, is it like a very popular language in the, gaming space, or is it,
Yeah, it's mostly that, and also there's Go Ethereum where you can easily add precompiles. It's just like it's both popular in the Ethereum ecosystem and in the gaming ecosystem.
very nice, very nice. Yeah, if anyone
And
here, sorry, go ahead, Yijia.
and it's a good language too that we like.
Nice, nice, yeah. If anyone in the chat here has questions, of course, feel free to unmute yourselves or, um, type in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself, of course.
Just trying to understand a bit better how the architecture is. So most of your game logic runs into this Go process, let's say, like a traditional game logic on a web application, let's say. And from time to time, or at the end of the match, you commit the state into the EVM smart contract, right? Like we played a match of this real-time strategy game. I won. This is what happened. I lost X armies. You won Y territories. This kind of thing, right? And then
We replay the entire game, and then that gets settled on like whichever chain you're using.
And then you have a node acting as a sequencer that does the de facto simulation. And
yeah, one or multiple nodes.
Okay. And then you have the simulation being re-executed by the interested parties, and you have a dispute protocol for someone to prove that the sequencer didn't actually simulate the game correctly in case it happens.
That's correct.
Cool. Really interesting. And you have really fast communication because you have like a couple of nodes doing the sequencing, talking to each other in real time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm curious about, so, one big topic, and I'm sure you've heard of this a ton of times, but, once you go highly financialized, like, how do you deal with bots, right? Like, is that something you're thinking of like embracing, or is it something you want to, deter bots from like playing and like kind of protect humans, let's say?
Yeah, this is a pretty controversial topic in the on-chain game space because I feel like most people just throw their hands up and say, we welcome bots. And clearly that's not in the interest of most gamers. But we also don't want to approach bots in the Web 2 approach, in the Web 2 way, which is, when we identify bots, we ban them, right? Which there's a lot of false positives that go in there, which hurts the player's interest, right? Some people just play really well, but they get banned for no reason, or maybe some people even get censored, right? So I think our attitude is neither of those. We think about our we think about our game design. We treat our game design very carefully, and mechanism very carefully, so that way more carefully compared to Web 2 games, who are not really like economic system based, except a few, right? So that bots, like we minimize the negative impact of bots on players. And that's number one. Number two, like we well, let me think. So yeah, so okay, actually number one, we recognize that like we basically list a couple of activities where bots or basically like players with multiple accounts, etc., can hurt the interests of other players. Like what's our ideal player flow? And then second is what I said. We design our mechanism very carefully. And third, like if and third, we run our games by seasons. It's not like we do not buy into the fantasy of like uh, really like the autonomous world in the original sense, which is like you deploy an instance and you actually never change it, and that there will be people and like vibrancy on there without you doing anything to go to like contribute back to it, right? That's like a very, I would say, like fantastical concept where like even the best of Web 2 developers can't have a stable economy with like all of the levers. How can you achieve one without? So like that's why we run the games by season, and like if we identify that player interest on the whole are hurt within a season, right? Now notice that we do not have any rights to censor anyone, and that's the thing that really should be guaranteed within any given season, right? But afterwards, if we identify that some things went wrong, let's say like the players who played really well just did not get rewarded as much as people who played a lot, put in a lot of time, but maybe like they're just away from keyboard, but did not play well. Let's say like the first category were not rewarded. Then in the next mechanism design, we rectify that, right? And there are many ways. Like we're pretty confident that we're able to rectify these errors, and eventually we'll converge to a system where yes, there will still be bots in the sense that they don't act as a normal player that might have some negative effect on other players, but it's gonna be pretty robust, right? I think that's really the way to go. You want to be iterative, but you don't want to have all the power to go against anyone, right, at any given time. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That does.
And yeah,
seem
I really disagree with the concept of like having bots be players. Like people who say that with a straight face, like either they're just like the best game designers that we have not encountered who will make like the best games in 10 years, or who are just like who don't have a way of solving this. Right. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because then the bots. I mean,
Because they do like yeah they like you people don't want to play with bots. Period. Like yeah, especially if there's reward involved. Like yeah.
or it becomes like a game like only for a very specific audience, maybe like.
Exactly. Like for people who can program bots, which like there are games for that purpose, right? But I'm just saying, like that type of game, it's like it's inaccessible to most people. The best example is like I can't remember the name. It's a JavaScript game, open source game, where you can dig tunnels and program your own bots and stuff. Like that's a contest for programmers in the same category as like LeetCode or something, or like programmer contest, which is like very different from games,
For sure.
like the traditional sense of games. Yeah.
Makes sense. So what would be like the specific mechanisms that you identified to like scripts?
Oh,
Is that-
sweet. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, I guess it is an iterative thing. Like there's not like one answer. Like you need to do this to remove bots, but yeah. But is there like
Yeah, you asked like what specific ways, right? And that's a super good question. We put a lot of thought into this. So on two levels, right? One is bot resistance in the session game, and the other is in the meta game. So in the session based game, we identify what bots are best at, which are doing repetitive things like simple repetitive tasks, and therefore in our game, actually, chat is like chatting and negotiating with other players is probably the most important thing you need to do, or at least as important as the stuff on the battlefield, um, which is very difficult for a bot to mimic and to be good at. Uh, so yeah, like basically, the idea is that uh, once the players notice that someone talks very strangely, uh, they will know that it's a bot, and and based on their design, they'll very likely lose in this game. It's kind of like diplomacy in that sense, where I wouldn't say impossible to break, but very very hard to break with a bot. So essentially, like that's a very big complexity factor, and then on the metagame level, I think we're just at metagame level is really just like what would bots do? They would try to cheat the economic incentives or rewards. I think on that front, we just need to think about do we have a robust ecosystem? Like how can people cheat the system and like honestly just iterate season by season.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, this bot race is kind of hard, right? So we have really simple bots that people use to cheat on online games, but we also have a really evolved generation of bots that are being progressively released, right? So I was scared a couple of years ago when OpenAI made a bot that bet the best human players in Dota, for instance, which is a super hard game for you to make a bot, right? It has secrecy, it has a lot of stuff, and also a lot of cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if we have this generation of bots, it might be really, and combined with ChatGPT and other stuff, it might be really hard for you to understand it's not an actual human, right? Even on the social layer.
Yeah, I mean, I can only say relatively. It's possible that if our game involves a lot of financial stake, and someone may be incentivized to build such a bot, in which case we'll figure it out when it happens.
Probably at a certain point we'll need something like what WorldCoin is trying to achieve, right? A proof of humanity or something, to then be allowed to play a game.
Well, that would be amazing, but we first need that to be adopted by a significant portion of population. But yeah, something like that would be amazing to have, of course.
But can't you still have like a bot tell you what to do and like you just press the button as a human?
If it's a slow-paced game, yes, but real time, it's kind of hard.
Well, at least like I guess with that, like you can't just create another account and create another account and play.
True.
It's harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now this is super cool. I'm just curious now, like Keystone, are you like going after? So you guys are focusing on this game, but are you going after people or teams or Web2 game developers to essentially build on Keystone, or what's the strategy there?
Yeah, so Keystone, like we are, like our thinking is that yes, Keystone is very cool technology. The best way to demonstrate the technology is not yet to speak around about it all over the place, but instead to have a really good product built on it. And the best product right now that can be built on it is our own game and the ecosystem around it. So like that's what happened with Doom and Doom Engine and Fortnite with Unreal with Fortnite and Tencent's games, right? Like you need power applications to demonstrate people the power of the underlying infrastructure, at least for game engines. So that's like the game is what we're focusing at the moment. And that does not mean we're not focusing on Keystone, right? Like when we're building the game, we're adding features to Keystone all the time, and Keystone is only becoming more robust as we build out the games. So it's just like a order of like what comes first.
Yeah, it's the usual chicken and egg. I feel like
Mhm.
we in all the game builder calls we've had, it's funny. Like you always have this. Even Guilty was on like a couple months ago, and he was also
Mhm.
talking about this, this chicken and egg issue. And but yeah, it's like everyone is, you need to build something before you know what the infra is going to look like, and vice versa.
Exactly.
So
I
makes
guess
sense.
except for crypto L1s, but yes, in most cases.
Yes, true. That's about so from my side. Those are my main questions. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts or questions. Or Yijia, if I forgot something that you wanted to discuss. Um,
Yeah, no, I think we touched on most things that are relevant.
Sweet. Well, this was super informative, and I don't know. Is there something somewhere where people can keep up to date and be players? Test your game when it comes out. I guess the
Yeah,
Curio.
follow our Twitter. I'll send it in the chat again. It's just Twitter Curio, and yeah, we should have important updates in about a month and a half, roughly, uh, plus minus a month, and yeah, follow our Twitter. We'll have announcements there.
Sweet. Yeah. Awesome. And maybe I'll bump into you. Or we'll bump into you in Denver. We'll be there around there as well. So maybe
Sounds
catch
good.
up.
Hit me up.
Yeah.
We'll catch up.
Sounds good. Thanks
Thanks
everyone.
for having me.
Thanks for coming. All right.
Bye, guys.